So let's talk about Islam's spread into West Africa. So, first thing you want to know is that Islam will spread into West Africa with trade. Trade is the biggest reason why Islam will spread. This was covered in your midterm final, where we read about the Trans-Saharan Trade Network. To review, the Trans-Saharan Trade Network was when North Africans predominantly brought salt, and the West Africans had gold, and they traded goods back and forth. Not just salt and gold, many other products were traded. Silk would be an example which came into West Africa at this time. And these products were traded back and forth from North Africa to West Africa. This trade basically started. First they tried with horses, but that didn't work out the best. A lot of the horses didn't make it across the desert. And what changes this is when they bring in camels from Arabia into first North Africa, and then they could find that they're much better at crossing the Saharan Desert. And this will bring our North African traders into West Africa. And the people of Ghana majorly benefit from this trade. The Empire of Ghana starts around the year 800. The Empire of Ghana starts around the year 800. And it starts as traders are coming in, they're bringing goods, and the people of Ghana realize that they have a very valuable asset that they can trade in their gold. They start taxing the outsiders who come in to make money off the trade, and they get more goods coming in from all over the world, which increases the wealth of Ghana. Well, if you have a wealthy product in gold, a wealthy resource, you have to protect it. So Ghana slowly forms their empire. They have a king who grows in strength and power. And Ghana becomes a strong empire in West Africa at this time. And what will happen is Ghana will go from being an animistic religion or believing in animism to more believing in Islam. Now, animism is more of a belief that you believe that all living creatures basically have a soul or have some kind of like spiritual power. It's kind of similar to what many people think about with traditional American Indian beliefs. Animism is also associated with having a lot of respect for your ancestors. Looking to your ancestors for strength. Even praying to the spirit of your ancestors who came before you to help guide you in your life. The belief is that your ancestors will continue to live in you. It's not really that different than Dia de los Muertos, for example, or Day of the Dead. Okay? So the people of Ghana believed in animism, like many West Africans did at this time. And what happens is, as the Islamic traders come in, they will bring their language, Arabic. They'll bring their language, Arabic, into West Africa. They'll not only bring goods like salt, but they'll also bring a lot of the education that we talked about from places like Baghdad will come into West Africa, where the West Africans will be able to advance that knowledge. Now a note about products that are being traded. Gold and salt are the ones that are talked about. There's also copper that's brought in. There's silk. However, one of the things there were also people who were traded too, because yes, there was a slave trade at this time. There was a slave trade at this time. This is not the Europeans coming in, that will come later. Many of the slaves who were traded at this time from West Africa would have been like in many societies like Rome, where we talked about, which had tons of slaves, where it would have been people who were in debt, people who may have committed a crime, or people who may have been captured as a prisoner of war could be a slave. Does that make sense? This is different than the slavery that many of us are familiar with and we'll talk about. This is not a racial-based slavery where you're slave based on how you look, and that you're a slave and your kids are slaves and they're slaves after them. Does that make sense? But having slaves in a society was actually very common in many parts of the world at this time. Okay? So let's continue. So the Empire of Ghana will slowly become more Islamic. Why does it become more Islamic? Because many of the people who are bringing goods in are Muslims. They bring in paper for writing. They bring in Islamic law. And they're pretty good at organizing a government, so many of the people of Ghana decide that they promote the Muslims because many of them are very good writers, they're organized, they have law. It's kind of like they're good lawyers. They're good people who are good at organizing, so they start taking the government positions. Does that make sense? And slowly over time, more of the elites in Ghana become Muslims. And eventually the king of Ghana becomes a Muslim. And when that happens, many of the people convert to Islam. Does everybody? No. You have a continuum. You have some people who are animistic and stay animistic. And you have some people who become 100% Islamic. Most people are somewhere in between. They keep some of their animistic beliefs, and they take some of the Islamic beliefs and they mix them together. We call that cultural diffusion when they mix cultures. Okay? What will happen is Ghana will fall in the year 1076. Some people say it falls from within. It becomes kind of like a civil war. Some historians believe there was an army who came in and took them over from the North Africa. They will not be the last empire. There will be two more. The Mali and the Songhai Empire. The Mali and the Songhai Empire will expand and become even larger and more powerful. And Mali and Songhai will both be Islamic empires. Okay? Let's look a little more at our Islamic kingdoms in West Africa. We're going to look at one city that was formed in the Empire of Mali. And that would be Timbuktu. Yes, it's a real place. Timbuktu was a major city in Mali. It was a book writing center. Like Baghdad, paper was brought there. And there were scholars who wrote their books in Arabic. They're still there. There are literally hundreds and hundreds of books in Timbuktu to this day that were written in this time period. This is a time in Europe, again, where they were writing books on leather, so they weren't very common. So the literacy rates in places like Timbuktu and Baghdad would have been higher than most places in Europe. More people were reading. And that meant that there were many schools in places like Timbuktu. Timbuktu also had 3 major universities. Students from Europe, the Middle East, would come to Timbuktu to study. Very common to see scholars going back and forth from Timbuktu and Baghdad in this time period. They're very similar cities. Islam will bring some things into West Africa which will be used and expanded. One of them are numbers and counting in tens. Again, we talked about Roman numerals in the past and how hard it would be to do math doing that. We talked about the Mayans. The numbers that we use today are called Arabic numbers. They were used in the Muslim world and brought into West Africa. The decimal point. Muslims are responsible for the decimal point. Think of how much math is done with that. Architecture, buildings. And the big one, which might make some of you mad, algebra. Sorry about that one. So algebra was also brought into West Africa, where it was studied and advanced in Timbuktu. In Timbuktu, they had such good scholars that they wanted to bring scholars from all over the world and bring in the best to their city. And what they found was the professors they had were just as good. So they didn't need to actually have professors from everywhere else because they had very good scholars and professors in their own city at this time. So the Islamic kingdoms in West Africa, I'll give you an approximate period, is about 800 to 1600 is when these are at their peak. And they become part of Dar al-Islam. Dar al-Islam is a territory that is covered mostly by Islamic governments using Islamic law. Arabic is a language where you can start from here, travel all over this part, and if you speak Arabic, you can communicate with many, many people. It's the trade language, the international language, really, of the world at this time. A lot like English today. Many people all over the world want to learn English because you can advance. Does that make sense? If you drop me off in little China somewhere and say, I'll teach you English, would I probably get a lot of students? Yeah, I probably would. Many other countries as well. That's what Arabic was like at this time. All right, one last thing. Mansa Musa. Mansa Musa, who's recognized as the richest person ever in history. Ever. Richer than the guy from Amazon.com. Richer than that guy from the Mexican telephone company who's really loaded. I forget his name. Richer than Bill Gates or any of those people. All right? So, Mansa Musa was the king of Mali. Which meant technically he owned all the gold in Mali. So, yeah. He was respected around the world during his reign, but he's most known for his pilgrimage, or his Hajj, which is one of the pillars of Islam, to Mecca. On his trip to Mecca, he brought hundreds of people with him who brought gold. They were traveling with it. They were basically a big show of force of wealth as well. And they went all the way to Mecca to do the pilgrimage. And what's one of the pillars of Islam? You're supposed to give money to the poor. So on the way back, they start giving their gold away. So much so that the price of gold went down because there was so much more of it around. So it was a good thing that they were giving gold away, giving gold to people, but in a way it was kind of bad because it made the price of gold go down. Does that help Mali's empire? No. But they did help a lot of people on the way who needed money, needed gold. So this shows that Islam was able to spread, not just in Asia. We talked about the Swahili coast in your reading, and West Africa as well. And this is where Islam is able to spread in this time period. It does it pretty quickly as well.